This building here is the Vittoriano Monument in Rome, and it's a monument to the reunification of Italy. As you see in the center here, you've got in gold mosaics surrounding the goddess Rome and all the Italian cities coming to pay tribute to Rome. At the top, you've got all the regions coming together. This is the reunification of Italy, and the first Italian kingdom under the Savoy monarchs was created in 1861. Rome was not part of it because it was guarded by French troops who'd been sent there to help the Pope fight against Garibaldi in 1848, pardon me. So Rome was not part of Italy for the first 10 years. This monument was erected 50 years after the initial reunification. And what happened was when the Franco-Prussian War happened in 1870, the French troops were withdrawn, the Italian army moved in, and Rome fell. The Pope refused to recognize the new Italian state. The Pope refused to go out on the balcony. He described himself as the prisoner in the Vatican. He didn't want to deal with the Italian state, and he excommunicated all the Italian royal family and everybody involved in ending what had been the papal states for over 1,000 years. So you have then a monarchy. In the center of the picture here, I'm pointing at the screen, which is not much use, but in the center of the picture here, you have King Victor Emmanuel II, the first king of Italy. I didn't cut his head off. That was the person taking the picture of the tiger tank. But his grandson is the person I want to talk a little bit about today. That is King Victor Emmanuel III, and he is the person who appoints Mussolini. Mussolini marches on Rome. The king, he says, give him the job. Mussolini never got more than 10% in an election. Give him the job. And this is where we come to fascist Italy. So we have fascist Italy. Democracy ends. Instead of having votes, you just have a yes or no. So this is Palazzo Braschi in Rome. It's now the Museum of Rome. This is them calling for a yes vote in 1934. It's either yes to the list of candidates or no. If you said no, they could just give you another list of candidates. There's no democracy. It's all ended. Every newspaper is controlled by the state. The economy is all controlled by the corporations. And this is Palazzo Braschi. Mussolini has been given this job to look after up a bit. Okay, the king has been quite happy to let Mussolini take the lead on things, but Mussolini also wants to do a deal with the church. He wants the church on his side. So in 1929, he deals with the Vatican, and this is crucial to understanding the occupation of Rome, because 1929, the Vatican finally talks with Mussolini, they come with an agreement, and the Vatican state is created. Not only does the Vatican state get created, but there are also, throughout Rome, there are enclaves, St. John Lateran, St. Paul's Without the Walls, that are all part of this Vatican state. They are not part of Italy. We see in the center here that this is Via Conciliazione before the road was created. That Via Conciliazione is the reconciliation between Italy and the Vatican state. All those things are destroyed to create the road we know now in Rome. And the Vatican is now at peace with Italy, okay? Italy itself is not going to be at peace so much longer because in June 1944, they joined and declared war. June 1940 is obviously 9 months after the start of the war in Poland. Germany invaded Poland. Italy was not in a state to enter into any war. Industry was not there, money was not there, and so the king, who is the head of state, normally Mussolini is the guy on the front, but the king is the head of state, and so he says, you can't go in the war, we can't do it. And only in June 1940, with the fall of the French government in Paris and Dunkirk, the British fleet in Dunkirk, only at that point did they insist on getting into the war before it's over, at which point they declare war on Britain and France, trying to invade France, and it doesn't. And Rome prepares for war. There's a couple of pictures of Rome preparing for war. This is the Arch of Constantine by the Colosseum. That is a wall of sandbags that's been created to protect the Arch of Constantine. This is Michelangelo's Moses. Everybody knows that St. Peter has changed. And again, they bricked it up to protect it. But Rome wasn't really bombed, okay? Cities like Milan were bombed 4 days after the declaration of war. Naples was bombed by the French 10 days after the declaration. Rome was never touched until later on, Operation Sofsky, the landings in Sicily, We have General Patton, General Montgomery, they're in Sicily. They do the first bombing run on Rome. And that is July the 19th, 1943. And it's hitting the railway yards at San Lorenzo by Termini Station. There is a park at San Lorenzo, it's the park of July the 19th, where there are, where did the water go? Can I have the water back, please? Sorry, thank you. Pardon me. So there's a park just by Termini Station, which has got, there were 3,000 people were killed in that bombing raid. It is a traumatic event for the city. Italy went into a war without having the industry or the money to engage in it. They fought against mechanized armies like the British, and it didn't go well. They had turned, the whole country is sick and tired. They went out of it. With the bombing of Rome, it's the final straw, and a week later, Mussolini falls. Mussolini is fired by the head of state. It's one of the most important things when we're thinking about the Italian campaign is Mussolini was never in charge. It was always the king was the guy. He was only working for the king. We had towns named after him, Mussolini canals named after him, stadiums, everything was named after him, but he was never the head of state. That was the king. And so the king appoints a guy, General Badoglio, and Hitler is absolutely furious. He does not trust the king, he does not trust Badoglio, and he prepares for them to surrender. And he gets Field Marshal Rommel to move troops, more and more troops down into Italy to be ready for what they consider the betrayal. They don't trust these two at all. So Rommel is preparing for the time that they need to seize Italy. At the same time, Badoglio and the king are trying to negotiate an armistice with the Allies. But the Allies, General Eisenhower would be the person who would negotiate it. He can't act without the direct authority of Roosevelt and Churchill because they're dealing with people who've been at the heart of the fascist state for 20 years. You just can't go ahead and do it. So whilst the Allies delay, the Germans prepare. They move many, many units down in Italy. What happens on the 8th of September? Badoglio still wants a delay. Don't announce the armistice. Don't announce the armistice. They're not ready. The Americans send a general to Rome to check whether they can come in. The king wants Rome protected by the American paratroopers. The 82nd Airborne is on the ground in Sicily, ready to head to Rome to land in the Villa Borghese Gardens to protect Rome. The general, Maxwell Taylor, who later became head of the 101st Airborne, first general to land in Normandy, he goes, meets Badoglio, reports back to Eisenhower, they're not ready. Eisenhower, we've got to go. We have a flotilla of ships heading for Salerno right now. We are going to announce the surrender, and they have 2 hours to surrender, to repeat it. Eisenhower reports the surrender of Italy, the armistice. 2 hours later, Badoglio repeats it. At that point, within minutes, the German army starts moving. The Germans have got troops all around Rome, but mainly it's the paratroopers down in Pratica del Mare, which is an air base just north of here. And on that 8th of September, the command goes out. The wheat is ripe. Alaric immediately means go seize Rome, seize Bologna, seize Milan, seize Florence, seize everyone's cities. Alaric, for anybody who knows a bit of history, was the Visigoth king who sacked Rome 15 centuries ago. So a little bit of history. The operation was officially Operation Axis, but the original name was Alaric. But they're moving throughout the whole of the peninsula. At the same time, they're fighting their allies at Salerno. What is happening in Rome, and crucial to the battle for Rome and the battle for Italy, because look at these numbers for the Germans. They're outnumbered. But what they are is organized, and they have directions. On the Italian side, in the middle of the night after that announcement, the king, Badoglio, and a lot of senior government officials get in cars and they run. In the middle of the night, they head east towards the Canadian place, Ortona, where there's a ship waiting to take them down to Brindisi. So the Italian troops who are in Rome, ready to defend the city, say, well, where's the king? He's run away. What happens to morale? What happens to orders, directions? They're left completely without any instructions what to do, and all they can do is resist using local initiatives. So again, even though they've got the numbers and they're on home turf, they're up against the elite German paratroopers who know what they're doing, and Kesselring has given them exact orders where to go, what to seize, etc. Individual units make stands against it. The final stand is at Porta San Paolo. Rome is an incredible city, and even now today, it has the Aurelian walls. There are 12 miles of the Aurelian walls built in 3rd century AD, so 1700 years ago, and they're still there, and there are 18 gates in it. Porta San Polo, so St. Paul's Gate, is one of the ones coming up. You have the Italian troops, you have the Sardinian Grenadiers, you have the Montebello Lancers. They're just on their own local initiative trying to fight back. The civilians are coming in to help them to see if they can do anything. They're up against the elite paratroopers. So that's the last stand of the Italian military. There's 570 Italian casualties fighting that battle to stop the entry into the city. St. Paul's Gate today, it's just by the pyramid, and it almost looks like a castle, but you'll see part of the wall, the Aurelian walls, going through the pyramid, and on the other side, the walls have been knocked down to let the roads through, and that's exactly where the fighting was. If you look on a map of Rome today, just to give you an idea of this area, so I'll stop pointing with my fingers and use the mouse. Porta San Paolo is there. The main battle was here. The pyramid of Rome is a fantastic, interesting position. I saw you move. Here's the non-Catholic cemetery. If anybody doesn't know it, it's well worth a visit. There's Keats and Shelley. We have the Commonwealth Cemetery, 450 graves at the Commonwealth Cemetery. And we have the Resistance Memorial here, and I'm going to show you the Resistance Memorial to that day in a moment. I just want to say the park there next to the gate is now named after that day, the final stand against the paratroopers coming in. I just want to add here, down at the bottom, you've got Ostiense Station. If anybody knows Rome Ostiense, Ostiense Station was specifically built to welcome Adolf Hitler to Rome. That's what it was built for. And that street we see here was originally called Adolf Hitler Street. It is now the Ardeatine Cave Street, okay? On this memorial wall that I mentioned, this is a broken column. You'll see them in graveyards, and if you go to the Polish cemetery, you'll see, again, a similar thing. It means a life cut short, a young life cut short, whenever you see that in a graveyard. There are 4 plaques up there. The first 3 relate to that battle to defend Rome. The 4th one, on the right-hand side, is to the American 1st Special Forces Group, for when they came in 9 months later to liberate the city. So that's the 1st USA Canadian Forces plaque on the wall there. I just want to talk about the plaque at the top center there. That plaque says, here on the 10th of September 1943, on the boundaries marked by 17 centuries of defense against barbarians, the 17th centuries being the time that the Aurelian walls are stood there, guided only by faith and by opposing the German invader, they pointed the Italians out the way to honor and freedom. Okay? And that was the last stand. What happens 2 days later? Mussolini, after he'd been overthrown, had been imprisoned on the Gran Sasso. 2 days later, those paratroopers from Pratica di Mare, they go up, they rescue him, they start a new government in the north, the fascist government. What happens throughout the country is the Italian military is, again, they have no leadership, they have no direction. 640,000 Italian military personnel end up as forced labor in Germany. All those troops were given the option: you fight for Mussolini's army, which has just been set up in the north, or you go to forced labor in Germany. The overwhelming majority refused to fight, and they ended up in prison. There's a small museum Via Labicana in Rome by the Colosseum dedicated to the lives of those Italian military internees. 640,000 troops deported, disarmed and deported. The Germans now hold Rome, and you've got sites like Half-Tracts, Hanomag, next to the Castle Sant'Angelo. You've got Via Tretone with the Stokes in front of it, and you've got Via Conciliazione, which is still in construction. The Germans are occupying Rome. And I wanted to talk about 3 Germans in particular, because obviously there's a hell of a lot of other characters, but there's just 3 I'm going to mention. One is General Melzer, who's the top German guy in Rome. Colonel Kappler is the head of the Gestapo, more correctly the Sicherheitsdienst, but he's the head of the Gestapo. And one of his assistants is Captain Erich Priebke. Talking about Kappler, this is a guy who managed to get himself into many, many films. He was played by Richard Burton in Massacre of Rome. He was played by Gregory Peck in The Scarlet and the Black, opposite Christopher Plummer. Other way around, Christopher Plummer played him, right? And he's been played in many, many other films, including The Gold of Rome, about the roundup of the Jews of Rome. Okay? He is a Gestapo commander. He sets up his headquarters in Via Tasso, which was mentioned just a minute ago. This is now Gestapo torture chambers. It's now, if you go there today, it is the Museum of the Liberation. They've kept the Gestapo cells as they were, and they brought in a lot of documentation to read. Over 2,000 people were incarcerated and tortured there during that 9-month occupation, and that is mainly Kapler's doing. The Gestapo also had part of the Regina Coeli prison, but this is their main base, Via Tasso, and it's there because it's an annex of the German embassy not far away. Those people who were tortured and then sentenced to be executed are taken to Forte Brevetta to the west of Rome, and over 70 military and partisans, 68 partisans executed at Forte Brevetta by the fascist police. It was the job of the fascist police to provide the firing squads. After the liberation of Rome, the leading fascists were also shot here. Okay, if anybody's seen Roma Città Aperta, they have scenes like Don Morosini, people being shot at Forte Brevetta, and there's now the Martyrs Park with that monument there. The Germans obviously take over the best hotels in town, and if you know Rome, Via Vittorio Veneto, you have Hotel Flora, that was the Gestapo headquarters for a while until it got bombed by the partisans. Hotel Excelsior, anybody who knows Dolce Vita says this is where the paparazzi hang around nowadays. If you want a room there for the night, it's going to cost you about $1,000 right now, okay? And that was where General Melzer had his headquarters and a hell of a lot of other leading generals. U.S. Embassy was closed at this time, it's next door to it. Just a little further down, there's the Palace of the Corporations. That was a building that Mussolini built to control industry, so that all corporations got their direction from him at the Palace of the Corporations. Hotel Bernini is where the organization Todt had their operations. But this is the most defended part of German-occupied Rome, because all the big guys are there. The fascists come back in again. Again, the top guy, Bofferini Guidi, he ends up at the Excelsior Hotel. Caruso comes in to take over the police force. Koch takes over, just harassing partisans and trying to destroy the resistance. We've mentioned that the Germans had got their torture chambers. The fascists had their own as well. Pensione Oltremare, Pensione Giacarino are basically hotels that they used to torture people. And another group of fascists coming back were Palesco Bratsky. I showed you the picture before. The Polistrini body gang was so bad that the Gestapo raided them because they were giving the occupation a bad name. And the occupation is always held back by the fact that the Pope is there. Mussolini is in the north, the king is in the south, the Pope is there, and the Germans don't want an argument with the Pope. They don't want to cause trouble. But the Germans and the fascists have come back. Who are they chasing? The first people, we mentioned before, Cordero Lanzi di Montezemolo. He's the monarchist, and he's in Rome to organize the resistance on behalf of Badoglio and the king. He is caught by the Gestapo in January and ends up at Via Tasso being tortured. Bigger group are the anti-fascists who'd come out of hiding after 20 years of fascism. Bonomi had been the prime minister before Mussolini, and he's come out, they're trying to get politics going again, get democracy going again. They weren't informed about the armistice, they weren't informed about the flight of the king. They now run to safety. Just want to say a couple of people in this group, because this is the heart of the resistance in Italy. Bonomi was prime minister before and after the war. De Gasperi was prime minister after the war. Sandro Portini was president. Sargat, who's not in this photograph, also is president. In this group, you have the future political establishment of Italy. Where are they? They're hiding out in St. John Lateran's grounds. St. John Lateran, because it's Vatican cemetery, they can go there and the Germans won't touch them. And so in the seminary by St. John Lateran's, there are 800 pretty much VIPs hiding out. And if you look, I mentioned the Aurelian walls, and there's the Aurelian walls as they come along here. You've got St. John's Gate, Porta San Giovanni. You've got St. John Lateran, incredible church, and then there are all the politicians hiding out. And yet, here is Villa Volkomsky, the German embassy. There is their annex, Via Tasso, the Gestapo torture chambers. The leading political figures of Italy are hiding out literally 5 minutes walk from the Gestapo torture chambers. And the only thing stopping them ending up in Via Tasso with Montezemolo is that they're on Vatican ground. And they are always obviously at risk that the Pope might fall out, the Germans might decide to go against the church. But they know if they step out of there are machine guns outside the holy steps, pointed, ready to take anybody who comes out of there. But they are the heart of the resistance in many, many ways. In that seminary, there are also about 54 Jews. And I just want to mention the Jews of Rome, because this is something, when fascism fell, when Mussolini fell, they celebrated. They thought, this is it. Things are going to change. Like so many people thought the war's over, we're out of it. No, it didn't happen. And so what happens, one of the capitalist things, and I mentioned it with the Gold of Rome, is that one of the first things, less than a month, just about a month from after they took Rome, pardon me, Capua organizes his roundup of the Jewish ghetto in Rome. The Jewish ghetto in Rome is the second oldest in the world after Venice. The Jewish community in Rome predates Christianity. It started there at the time of Julius Caesar and Pompey going out to Jerusalem. And at 5:30 in the morning, the SS surround the area, and it's mainly women and children. We already talked about all the guys who were taken away, the military personnel, the other people hiding. It's mainly women and children. They're rounded up and they're sent on an 8-day journey to Auschwitz. Of the over 1,000 people, only 16 came back. One woman only, Settimia Spizzichino. She devoted her life when she got back to telling people about the Holocaust, and there is a bridge in Rome named after her. It's quite a nice bridge, actually. After that major roundup on the 16th of October, Capua leads the job of rounding up Jews to the fascists. And they're paid for each Jew they catch. So 5,000 for a man, 3,000 for a woman, 1,500 lira for a child. If Robert Katz, who wrote The Death in Rome, which the Massacre in Rome is based upon, he states that in 1944 a bottle of olive oil cost 1,000 lira. So that's what you get with your money for reporting people in. There are many networks hiding Jews out in Rome. A lot of the Catholic networks, Castle Gandolfo, again, Vatican territory, 3,000 Jews hiding there under the Pope's kind of watch. Monasteries. One group, I just want to come, and private homes we're looking after. I'm just going to show you whereabouts that is in Rome. We have Piazza Venezia, where it started off with the Vittoriano Monument. Teatro Marcello, this is the Jewish ghetto. You have a museum to this time there, the Museum of the Shoah. They blocked every entrance, rounded up everybody, put them onto lorries here to start that 8-day journey to Auschwitz. And that was the Jewish ghetto in Rome. One group that was helping out with Jews and lots of other people was the Rome Escape Line. So another group that's being hunted by Capua and the Gestapo. And Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty was an Irish cleric. He didn't need to get involved. It's a neutral country, Ireland. He's at the Vatican. He sees what's happening and he refuses to stand by and do nothing. And he gets involved. And he starts off helping British prisoners of war who made their way down to Rome. And he was no natural friend of the British. He'd grown up in the south of Ireland during the Independence War. He'd had friends killed by the Black and Tans. So he was no big fan of the British. But when he saw the Nazis in Rome, he said, there's a time to make a choice. And I'm going to help the British out and help the Jews of Rome. And he was doing that. And he had some great assistance from escaped POWs and people in Rome who would risk their lives to give houses to people. And he hit about 7,000 people in a city which has got rationing and food shortages. It's one thing to hide people, it's another thing to keep them all fed as well, okay? That is one group that Capua is chasing, and O'Flaherty can be in the Vatican, but he is often sneaking out to get money. He would get money from Prince Doria Pamphili, who was a rich opponent of fascism, and he would help finance O'Flaherty's network. But going out of the Vatican had a risk, and Capua had a white line painted around St. Peter's Square with snipers all around it, that if O'Flaherty stepped over the white line, they were to shoot, okay? But that's one group that Capua is chasing. Another group are the American Spy Network. Peter Tompkins, I don't know how many people know him, but he was originally from Georgia in the States. He grew up in Rome. His Italian was perfect. He was sent in before Anzio to help set up the network of spies in Rome because his Italian was perfect. He was dropped off by the British in Civitavecchia, went down and met up with the groups of Italians who were beginning the fight back. On the right-hand side is Baron Francesco Malfatti. He was called Franco. He ran the socialist network. They had people, workers in train stations, roads, shops, everywhere, watching every German movement. They would channel all this information together, and then Tompkins would check what was relevant, what not, put it into English, and he would send it back to the Allies. The guy sending it back is the guy in the middle, Maurizio Giglio, also known as Cervo. Incredible guy. He fought at Porta San Paolo, and when the Germans took the city, he went down to find the Americans to join the Americans. He's trained as a radio operator, and he's placed back into Rome to act as the operator on Radio Victoria. I've called this slide American Spy in Rome because that's Peter Tompkins' book, if anybody ever reads it, about what it was like living in there and hiding out and passing his messages on to the Allies. Peter Tompkins' messages sent via Maurizio Giglio were absolutely critical at the Battle of Anzio. Enigma was useful, but it wasn't fast enough for what they needed at Anzio. These guys were really critical. One tragic thing happened was Giglio going to pick up a radio, is betrayed by the fascists, and he ends up being caught. Okay. And does that mean time?
No, 5 minutes.
To finish?
No, 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to see some pretty pictures as well, okay? All right, this is where Palazzo Levitelli is. This is where where Peter Tompkins hides in a hole for 6 months for the entire duration of the battle. People are being forced labor sent off to Germany and Italy. People are being rounded up the streets from the second day of the occupation of Rome, all the way through when the Allies landed at Anzio. They just round up everybody on Via Nazionale to send them down to dig trenches and sweep them to Germany. Anybody who's called up, an 18-year-old, to join the army, if they refuse to join, they'll be shot, and they're told to do that. And the partisans outside Rome are doing a great job comparing to the Allies. The inside Rome, you have the Gap partisans. They attack Via Rosella, which is a little famous. I won't go into the details because there's not much time. Via Rosella today has got all the bomb blast marks on it. They chose it because it was the anniversary of the foundation of the Fascist Party on the 23rd of March 1919, 25 years. The fascists wanted a party. The Germans said, you've got to have it in the Palace of the Corporations, which is defended. The bomb goes up on Via Rosella, which is just around the corner. The people having their drinks at Palace of Corporations come to see all these German troops dead and dying in the street. Half of them have been drinking champagne. They're outraged. Hitler comes, gives the message, shoot 10 Italians for every German who's died. And that is what happens in the Italians Caves Massacre, okay? There's a memorial there nowadays which is worth visiting. I just want to point out two of the graves in there. Montezemolo, who was the head of the monarchists who I mentioned, and Maurizio Giglio, the radio operator, who was such a brave guy. After the Argentine massacre, they carried on oppressing Quadraro as a south of Rome. They took half the people, sent them out to Germany for forced labor. Food was running short, people were starving, and people were praying. They were praying for an end to this occupation that had gone on for 9 months. They had no food. This is a monument to 10 women who tried to seize bread. The bread ration for a day was 2 slices of bread a day, okay? The women were shot, and their bodies were covered in flour as a mark, okay? Everybody's waiting for the liberation of Rome. The liberation of Rome starts coming. Those gates in the Aurelian Wall start to see Porta Ferba, the Americans coming in. St. John Lateran. At that point in St. John Lateran, the people go to Ivano Bonomi and say, you're now Prime Minister of Italy, okay? Porta Maggiore. The American troops, 5th of March, coming in to liberate the city. The Italian partisans out on Via del Corso. The Americans in Piazza Venezia. I want to point out that when Mark Clark got to St. Peter's Square, the person that he met there was Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, who went over to offer him a hand because he spoke English, and the general was lost because he was trying to get to Campidoglio, City Hall, and so Monsignor O'Flaherty asked a young boy on a bicycle to lead the way so that Mark Clark could go and do his big press conference on the steps of Campidoglio. I just want to point out the metal bar on the front of the Jeep, okay? And there's other Jeeps with the same metal bar going down Via Conciliazione. That thing is because Jeeps, as scout cars, they had windscreens, but if the sun reflected off of them, it would give away your position. So they put the windscreens down, covered them in a canvas. At which point, the Germans would put piano wire across the road, and it would take your heads off, okay? And that's why you'll often see the bar on the front of the car. But there's no piano wire here, and there's no booby traps and snipers because it's Rome. And Rome was left by the Germans because they realized what a precious, important city it was. And so these troops who'd been through all that fighting at Anzio and Cassino are suddenly surrounded by happy children, happy people who've been liberated. The 500,000 refugees who were in Rome can now go home to places near Cassino and Anzio because they've had to leave them. The 7,000 people being prisoners of wars and Jews being protected by O'Flaherty, everybody can come out. There's a massive mass in St. Peter's Square on June the 5th with the Pope thanking God for the delivery of the city safe and sound. After that, the Allies come in, you have the Canadians in the Vittoriano, you have the Irish Brigade in St. Peter's Square, you have the Americans having donuts at the Colosseum. It becomes rest and recreation. There's no more war in Rome after the liberation of Rome. And so there is a memorial to the liberation of Rome. It's just by, it's on Piazza Venezia. It's quite small, but I just want to say about the person who got it there. It was a guy called Harry Schindler, a veteran of Anzio who fought for years to have a monument in Piazza Venezia to the liberation of Rome. One sign is for the partisans, the other sign is for the army. I want to say one last thing, because I didn't have much time in the end, was tomorrow's Republic Day. It's June the 2nd. Why is a national holiday tomorrow? In June the 2nd, 1946, they had a referendum. Do you want to have a king or do you want to be a republic? The king who had appointed Mussolini then ran away after the armistice, lost the vote. That is why tomorrow is a holiday, because it is now a republic. So King Victor Emmanuel III was the last, actually his son technically was King Victor Emmanuel III died in exile in Egypt because they were never allowed back in Italy after that. The example that they gave running away, demoralizing the Italian troops, the Italian people, was obviously held against them. So tomorrow, I hope everybody has a nice holiday.